There's no take two. There's no just a little more purple. Warts and all, you've downloaded the VO Radio Show.
Welcome to another VO Radio Show. My name's Andrew Peters.
And I'm Robbo.
And we're here to help you with your VO career in some way or another.
That's our job in life, our mission.
It is our job. It's our vocation.
That's it.
Now, we've been doing a bit of research in the interim between shows on the best microphone and preamp combination. So we went onto Radio Imaging, onto a Facebook page, and asked the question. And we got some really interesting results.
We did, and a wide gamut of results too, didn't we? Absolutely.
Well, if someone had said to me, or I'm sure with you, what would you expect to see in a voiceover studio?
Well, I think there's two givens, and I think that's sort of reflected in what we've seen on this page is the 416 and the TLM 103 seem to be a bit of a standard microphone, really, don't they? Let's be honest. There's a few variations.
Yeah, but I would have picked actually a U87 and a 416 or a 416, which is what the Americans call them. That's what I would have expected to see, and I would have expected to see an Avalon, either an M5 or a 737, depending on, how big the studio is.
Yep.
That's what I would have thought.
Yeah, and I think I would probably go with those combos too. But there's some creative people out there who have found some pretty awesome combinations by the sounds of things, though.
Yeah. And the first one that popped up, I'm looking out through the window of my booth here, and there's a photograph of me in a radio studio in 1980, maybe 2. And hanging in front of me is an SM5B.
Right. Wow. Well, there you go. There's someone actually mentioned that, I think. Yeah, someone went from an SM5B into a 528E.
Yeah.
Which is a kind of nice combination by the sounds of things.
Look, I've never seen an SM5B or any of those Shure mics in a studio, apart from in radio.
No, I don't think you would. It's sort of like walking into a studio and seeing an SM58 hanging there ready to go. Yeah.
I
don't know.
So that's an interesting one.
Yeah. Having said that, I'm on an SM58 right now.
Good work. There was also the one that actually blew me away, so someone's got plenty of cash to throw around. That was the Manley Voxbox.
Yeah. Yeah, they're nice, but as you say, you want to have a reasonable bank account to be looking at those. But yeah, if you can afford it, and absolutely.
Yeah, that would sound beautiful.
He doesn't mention what microphone he uses into that, though. I'd be interested to know what he's running into the Voxbox.
I would think it'd be something really clean. That's my guess.
Well, it would have to. You wouldn't, it would have to be, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And then with someone else with a 416 into an Art voice channel, which is another interesting combo.
Yeah.
Which is the Art voice channel, which I was unaware of, I got to be honest, until we started talking about putting this show down, seems to be a lower end channel in a box, a mic channel in a box. It's got EQ, compression, peak limit, the whole lot in a rack mounted unit. Which was kind of interesting. I personally don't EQ as I'm recording. So for me, that would probably not be a way to go, but he's obviously found a sound that he's happy with.
Yep, and you're the kind of guy that would put reverb on while you're recording, wouldn't you?
All the time. I actually record when I'm recording promos. I actually do it in 2 sessions. I actually do the first session where I record clean, and then I put my telephone EQ on and I get them to read it again.
Beautiful. Now, there was a mention in that thread of someone who likes to put reverb on as they record.
There was a couple of comments that sort of came after that maybe alluded to the fact that this chap wasn't on the right path, and as an audio engineer, I'm pretty sure he's not.
Yeah, that's right. Can you imagine get that one delivered?
Yeah, drowned in reverb. I'm not sure why he thought or thinks that's the way you would want stuff delivered. Maybe he has a reason, I don't know, and maybe he's not being clear in what he has to say. But I'd be interested to have a conversation on that one with him.
Yeah, it's kind of odd. Some of the combinations, though, there's one that I really, really liked actually, and I was quite surprised to see it, which is a preamp that I've got, which is the Grace M101, that I've always kind of liked. I've used it and then I haven't used it, and then I've used it again and I haven't, and I've actually found a really good combination. But the mic I use with it is an old 30-plus-year-old AKG C414 EB P48. for those technical people. But I think it needs a bit of work, so I've sent it away for repair. But I run that, and that's a really dark sounding microphone. But the combination of that with the Grace M101 is really nice. And I can see the guy is using a Mojave valve mic or tube mic running through the M101, which I reckon would sound pretty damn good.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. That sounds like a nice chain to me.
Yeah.
So maybe he can do some voice work for me.
Yeah, give him a call.
Yeah.
The LA610s, also the LA610 Mark IIs have popped up quite a bit. That seems to be, there's about 3 of them in the thread.
Yep.
And they're using different mics. There's a 416 going into an LA610. There's a Browmer going into an LA610. Mm-hmm. And the Yabby, he's got a Gefell running through the LA610.
That Yabby keeps popping his head up everywhere, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. I think the Yabby is actually me.
I think you referred to yourself as a lobster before we started recording,
I did,
yeah.
The lobster. But the LA610 with the right microphone sounds really good.
Yeah.
And I use mine with that Gefell, the M930. And it's such a clean microphone, beautiful microphone. And that LA610 Mark II just gives it a bit of honk, a bit of dirt. Yeah. Which is nice.
I guess it's all personal choice. I mean, for me, I do most of the recording I do here is for radio, which is obviously I'm sort of looking for a bit of a different sound, more different sound than to what you would do for, for a TV commercial or for cinema or something like that. But I go either the 416 or the 103 through my Drawmer 1960, and I love both those combos. For me, they sound good.
Yeah, Drawmer's lovely.
Yeah, it is nice. It's a nice pre, very nice.
Yeah. That's very nice.
That's my little setup. That's my little baby at the moment. But 6 months' time, I'll change my mind and get rid of something and replace it with something else, no doubt.
Yeah, probably. It's funny, actually. Our guest a bit later on in the show is Travis from Sound Pure in North Carolina. Sound Pure is not only a dealer selling gear, but they also have a beautiful studio down there. And in fact, I did see something get posted on Facebook just last week. Bruce Springsteen dropped in and started playing, had a bit of a play in their shop, picked up a few guitars and stuff.
Nice. It's nice to be Bruce Springsteen, isn't it?
Yeah, be really cool.
Just pick up a few guitars.
Yeah. But Travis, I know, down at Sound Pure, they are big fans of the Sebetron.
Okay.
That was where I first saw a review on the Sebetron before I knew anything about them. And they loved them, so I'd be curious to see what he has to say now and how it still stacks up a year or two down the track.
Well, there's one of those in your rack, is there not?
Indeed. In fact, I'm using it right now.
There we go.
Yeah.
Here's one we
I do like the
earlier.
Sebetron. The Sebetron's it's certainly a flavour, and I think it'd be one of those pre's, and we'll ask Travis what he thinks, but I just think it's one of those pre's that with the right voice, it's good, but I don't think it will work for every voice. I think and it wouldn't work for every microphone either.
Yeah, right. It's not
universal. So you got to be a bit selective about, what you run through it, I think.
Well, there you go. Well, we should probably get into that interview because that sounds interesting.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's cross to North Carolina. And our special guest today from Sound Pure, Travis Hall.
The voice for the voices. This is the VO Radio Show.
G'day, Travis.
Good day. How are you?
Very well indeed.
I love hearing Americans try to say g'day. Next thing we'll have you saying, how's it hanging?
Oh, please no.
Fair dinkum.
Fair dinkum. She'll be right, mate.
Yeah, no worries. Now, Sound Pure has been one of my favourite spots to investigate over the years, watching all the videos of all the geek gear, because I love it. It must be pretty cool working in a place like Sound Pure, I have to say.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, we say on a regular basis. I mean, we're just really spoiled. I mean, everyone that works here is obsessed with gear, be it instruments or recording gear, and kind of the whole mission and focus of Sound Pure has been from the very beginning finding the best of the best within every price point and championing those pieces and helping people, get knowledge of which of those pieces those are, and to help best improve their recordings and their musical performances, So we're just surrounded by, the equipment that we use ourselves and we just are inspired by and incredibly passionate about.
It's the perfect combination of a business, really. You sell gear and you've got a studio. So all the companies that make the stuff are going, try our new preamp, try our new microphone. And the rack in that studio is unbelievable.
And the best part about it, honestly, is that it's constantly rotating. I mean, you mentioned, manufacturers asking us to try the new pieces they come out with, and that's what we're all about. I mean, we do shootouts both internally for our own training purposes, as well as video shootouts that you can find on our YouTube channel. Basically gear comparisons is kind of one of the best ways we found to really learn what a new product or just any product is all about. Here it's pros, here it's cons. Just really compare it to the other alternatives in that similar price point, and up against, of course, like the standards in each class. So when we have a manufacturer coming to us saying, "Hey, I just released this microphone. It's either it does this cool new thing, or it's our new flagship," or like, "Awesome, well, first send it to us, and we'll see how it goes up." It holds its own against, like I said, both standards within those categories as well as just popular alternatives. So it's a really great, as you mentioned, a really great combination, because we can test the gear that we are selling in my opinion, one of the best studios on the East Coast of the United States.
Ooh, be cool. Yeah. Now, with this show, we're actually looking at the right preamp, or the combination of preamps and microphones for voiceover. We ran a poll on Facebook through the Radio Imaging, I think it was, their profile, and got some really interesting combinations come through. Not what I expected. I kind of thought we were going to see U87s, 416s, Avalon, M5s or a 737 or something, but we got some really interesting ones.
Yeah, I suppose everyone's taste is personal, really. I mean, I guess that's what the results of that survey show. I mean, for me here, Travis, just to give you an idea of what I run, I have just a little home studio that I do a whole bunch of radio imaging out of for a whole bunch of stations around the globe, plus some TV work. And I just have a little booth in the corner here and I just run a 416, or I also have a TLM 103 through a Drawman 1960 and straight into Pro Tools, which I find works for me. But then Andrew has a whole separate rig of, I think you've got 2 or 3 preamps, don't you?
Yes, it's getting a bit ridiculous now. I've got one of Travis's favourites, or Soundpure's favourites, the Sebatron, and I've got an LA610, an M101 Grace, and then a couple of compressors, the 2254 Neve, WA76, and the Grace M102, and then microphones. This one, the Gefell 92.1. A 930 Gefell, and a couple of other bits and pieces I don't use very much, but I've just been playing with a vintage C414 EB P48, which I just had all the capacitors changed from the old tantalum ones that were playing up. The level was about 10%. Got the level back up, all good, but now I have a grounding issue, or earth hum. So, you've got to be kidding me.
There's always something.
Yeah,
so that's how it goes.
From your sales point of view, from selling gear, are there any combinations that stand out as common, or more bought than others?
Absolutely, and honestly, I kind of separated almost into 2 different needs, I would say, at least from our perspective, which is one, are you going to be building a voiceover chain for just you, just one single voice, in which case we'd probably spend a little bit more time getting to know the tonal qualities of that voice and finding a microphone and preamp that would best pair with that specific timbre. Or if you're doing a voiceover commercial studio where you're going to have a bunch of different voices and talents coming in and out, you're the single engineer, we'd probably be looking towards something that's a little bit more transparent, a little bit more, in our experience, just to be a little bit more versatile with a bunch of different sound sources. So, and the different products, different pieces of gear in those respective categories can vary very differently. For example, going with the first option, if it's just a single voice, something like almost like a Neve clone for a preamp, a lot of times that additional weight and color that the Neve tone and the preamp adds can really complement a certain voice, but it can also be a little too heavy-handed for others. So, at the same time, you combine that with a microphone like the U87 that has a little bit more color as well, and the saturation coming from both the microphone and the Neve combined to create this really unique, incredible sound. Again, it can work really well on certain voices, but then you put it with another voice and it can just sound just uninspiring or just not working, accentuate wrong frequencies or something like that. Whereas something very clean and transparent, say like a combination of like a TLM 103 with either a Grace or the Avalon 2022 or M5, I view that as more of a cleaner chain that normally just cleaner chains as opposed to more saturated chains tend to work well on a wider variety of voices. So again, it kind of just depends on with our perspective at least, on what the goal is for that specific recording scenario.
In a world where only the best voice will do. Realtimecasting.com.
So room size and room setup would also have to be a consideration. I mean, Andrew, for example, is lucky enough to have a completely awesome setup where he is down outside Melbourne. For me here, where I don't do a lot of recording here, I'll usually go to a studio to record voice. I have a bit more of an open room. I mean, I've really just got some barriers up and, literally a doona hanging on the wall. So those sort of considerations have to come into play as well, yeah?
Absolutely. And I think knowing if someone's room is just absolutely terrible and they don't even have any blankets or anything to kind of do an impromptu sort of acoustic treatment setup, thinking about a shotgun microphone, a microphone that's going to be a little bit more focused with a tighter pattern, those microphones would probably play a lot better in those type of non-ideal acoustic scenarios because they're more focused. There's less room tone that's being picked up. So absolutely, again, shotgun microphones like the Sennheiser 416. That's a really common recommendation when the room is non-ideal because of it just doesn't pick up as much of the room, just much more focused.
Is
on
it still the leader of the pack? I mean, it always has been for a long time. It's almost become a standard, hasn't it?
For shotgun microphones for voiceover?
For shotguns, for voiceover.
I don't think I've personally found a shotgun microphone that outperforms the 416 for voiceover. At least one that for the price. I mean, it's I guess I would say it's a mid-price microphone.
Yeah.
But I would agree it's still the leader of its class in terms of a shotgun microphone for voiceover.
Yeah, I do a lot of freelance work here in Sydney, and I can't think of too many studios that don't have one somewhere, and the majority of them, I would say 80% of the studios actually use them, actually have them hung and use them more than any of their other microphones, to be fair.
Yeah, it's true. And the interesting thing is that not so much with female voices.
Yeah, normally, in my experience, the problem with recording female vocalists, if there is a problem, is a almost piercing high-end content. The 416 actually is, in my experience, is pretty rolled off in the higher frequencies. So the traditional logic as to why it wouldn't work as well with, or you don't hear it as often on female vocals, doesn't really hold true there. But I agree, it does tend to just sound best on a male vocal where it just kind of, or voiceover where it adds just more natural body and fullness.
There was actually something else we talked about, Travis, last time we spoke, and that was about the U87, U47, U67. You said anything with a 7 on the end has a propensity for having a bit of a honk in the mid-range.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is actually emphasized as someone who's got like a sort of nasally voice.
It's funny. Our sales manager here at SoundPure, he has a very mid-range, naturally honky voice. So he's always saying, "Do not ever throw a microphone that ends in 7 in front of my voice because it's gonna sound like this, like super congested." Again, it's kind of going back to if you're working with a specific voice, a lot of times there's a microphone out there that if it has a more of a pushed frequency range or more of a color, there's going to be a handful that work incredibly well with that voice, and there are others that are just going to, again, accentuate the wrong parts or the less pleasing parts of that voice. So for folks that do have more of a less deep, kind of more of a upper mid-range focus in their voice, I would probably, at least at first, steer clear of the 47 microphones, because that's just the mid-range is one of the most strongest and most identifiable characteristics of those 7 microphones, and most also commonly the problem areas when you combine it with a vocalist that already has a good amount of mid-range.
Yeah, and it's funny you should say that because U87s are in most studios in Australia. It'd either be a U87 or a 416 Sennheiser. But inherently, the Australian accent is quite nasally. So by all accounts, the U87 is probably the wrong choice for a male Australian.
It's true. Well, and it just goes to show that, there are no absolutes. I mean, we were talking at the beginning of all the different chains that are out there, and it just always comes down to again what's in front of what is the natural sound of the voice. But most of the time, if you're working with decent, I mean, we're talking here about getting the absolute best chain. If we're splitting those fine hairs, it's something to think about in terms of finding the right tonal pairings. But I've heard the common pitch phrase for the U87. It's famous for what it hides, because it's just it is a very forgiving large diaphragm condenser mic. So I know that NPR, one of the most popular radio stations in the United States, I think the U87 is in every single studio of theirs. It's their primary microphone, and yeah, most of the time when I'm listening to it, I'm not hearing, oh, that's a really, really honky sound. So it just goes to show there are some kind of standards to kind of base your decisions off of, but when it comes down to it, there are always exceptions to the rule. We do the best we can to advise based off of the most common occurrences that we find in terms of both voice pairings as well as mic and pre-pairings. But when it comes down to it, there are always recording anomalies out there where something shouldn't work in terms of what we know about the products, but for some reason or not, it's producing a sound that is just inspiring and is really working and jiving at that time. So it's funny, we could talk about this. We can try and set the most black and white rules, but the minute you do that, there's going to be an exception right around the corner that proves that statement wrong. And I think that's kind of cool, honestly. It can be frustrating when you're, on the objective search for the quote unquote best sound, but it also, I don't know, there's a little bit of a fun in the sort of searching for the right creative solution and combination for what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, well, historically, the U87, when it was all, went from valve to transistor, AKG jumped in with their, C414s with the C12 capsule. And a lot of people, in fact, a guy who's been servicing this AKG of mine, claims that, as far as he's concerned, he actually prefers the 414 to do exactly what we're talking about. As a voiceover mic, he reckons it's got a better, it's got a bit more, it's a bit more open than the U87, and it's got just a bit more clarity to it. But not saying that the new C414s are the same. The early ones are completely different to the new ones, of course.
Yeah, I think they have probably like 5 or 6 different versions at this point since it was originally conceived. So, and yeah, they all sound a little bit different and accentuate, very subtle but different, specific frequency ranges. So,
yeah. Now, one of your favorite, and I saw this is how I ended up buying my Sevatron. It was all because I saw a video on SoundPure. And it wasn't until I saw that then went on to the pursuit of this preamp that I realized that the guy who makes them, Sebastian, actually lives in my town.
Yeah.
So I ended up calling him and going up and meeting him at a cafe and did a dodgy looking deal. Obviously, it was like him grabbing a box out of the trunk of his car and putting it into mine, and I'm giving an envelope full of cash. But
definitely nothing sketcy.
Nothing at all.
Back to your radio days, Andrew?
Exactly, yeah. Much smaller parcels than those days, my friend.
And hello to the Australian Federal Police if you are listening.
I'm reformed. But so you guys love the Sevatron, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah. We've got the 4000, which is essentially just the 4-channel version of the 2000 that you have, as well as the Axis, which is his stereo preamp, which is a slightly different flavor. But yeah, Sevatron, in our experience, kind of represents kind of some of the best of boutique to preamp building, and I think you using it just shows again kind of another counter to what I think most people would think for a voiceover application, which is the signal is going to be super compressed, going to be limited. So any noise is obviously going to be brought up during that process. And I think there's a big misconception out there that anytime you're using a piece of tube equipment, it's automatically going to come with a boost in noise floor. But that's not always the case if you're working with a well-built tube preamp. And again, I think listeners can just hear your voice right now going through the 2000 and hear that the noise is inaudible, or at least minimal to the point you can't barely even perceive it. So if there was a tube preamp that I would recommend for voiceover, the Sebitron products would absolutely be that. They also retain a decent amount of detail too. I mean, that's the other common problem with at least recording instruments, which is not too particular to this conversation, but a tube preamp can definitely shave off a lot of the transient detail, which is even on a voiceover could be too much of a good thing. You could lose definition, lose clarity, but I'm hearing your voice super clear right now, and it sounds great. So the Sebitron products are, again, kind of the best representation within that price point, at least for tube preamps, in my opinion.
I'm also breaking another rule because I'm running a tube microphone through a tube preamp, which is a bit of a no-no as well.
Naughty.
But but I mean, like you said, the noise floor in this is pretty well non-existent.
Right, exactly. And again, it always goes back to keep those absolutes in mind, keep the technical knowledge in mind, but don't be afraid to try anything and everything, because you may find that exception that, again, is just the perfect pairing for what you're trying to do. And again, keeping in mind that or keeping a focus on specific products, if you are looking to do some certain combinations like that are on the cleaner side of the tube spectrum, because there definitely is a spectrum there. Like just looking at the two Sebitron products, for example, the 2000, there's only a single knob gain. You just get more or less gain, and with that, it gives more tube character. The Axis actually has a dual gain structure, so you've actually got the tube coloration on the input, whereas the output is much cleaner and more open. So you could kind of dial more or less of the tube coloration you want while not worrying about how much. Just making sure you're getting an appropriate signal level while you're recording. So those preamps are always really nice too if you are looking to experiment a little bit more with tone. A preamp that has dual input and output control, because normally that's associated with the ability to get more or less color while still recording at an appropriate gain level.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The reason I've got the different combinations out of, if anyone's listening, is because like this one is perfect for something like a corporate or some kind of a narration, where I would use something really cleaner and more, cutting, sort of toppy, that I would use for radio, because it's going to be compressed pretty heavily. So you want something that's going to cut through the mix.
Absolutely. Within the voiceover specific sphere, you do have, certain tasks that you're doing that it does benefit from, maybe a sharper, transient, more heavy recording that a, solid state recording chain or something like, the TLM 103, a transformerless, very clean microphone, very present top end that actually might work in your favor when you're doing something, say like an automotive promotion or something like that. Whereas if you're doing something, if you're narrating a children's book that they're supposed to be listening to when they fall asleep, you don't want something that's going to be grating and biting at their ears with harsher upper frequencies or more present upper frequencies, and a more held back, reserved kind of rounder tube sound would be more fitting for that application. So again, it's going back to finding the right fit, not only for your voice, but also what you're trying to achieve, what sort of listening experience you want your listeners to have when they're listening.
So let's take a step back just quickly and take a step backwards from where we are. And for the listeners of this show who may be thinking about setting up a home studio or in the process of setting up a home studio, let's firstly talk about, and budget becomes a part of that. Let's put you on the spot and say I came to you as someone who was doing that, setting up. I was a voiceover talent. I'm setting up my first home studio. I'm not greatly technically minded, so I don't want to have to worry about overcompressing voiceover or whatever. What would be your suggestion in terms of a mic chain? Let's leave DAW out of it for now. What would be your suggestions in terms of a mic chain that would get me set up and ready to start sending my work out to studios for them to use?
Sure. I mean, in my opinion, I would always recommend starting with a large diaphragm condenser. I just find it to be provide the more ideal sound for voiceover, which is detailed but still smooth, still full, naturally full. And there are a handful nowadays out there that aren't wildly expensive. I mean, even the Neumann TLM 102, I think, is only $600 US right now. Mm-hmm. So it's relatively easy to get one that is high quality, that's going to be offering you a detailed open sound. From there, you could go a lot of different directions, but I've been really impressed just over the last year and a half with the quality of some of the budget recording interfaces that are kind of the all-in-one systems that have a preamp and, of course, the converter and the computer interface built into it. Yep. Honestly, the first one that comes to my mind that I'm just impressed more and more with every time I use it is the Universal Universal Audio Apollo. And the really cool thing about that preamp, or the interface in and of itself, is it has preamp emulation software built into it. So you can actually record with the bass pre that is very clean, very open, if you would like that sound. But if you did want to go add, say, a little bit more coloration, they have emulations of, Andrew, you mentioned you have the Universal Audio 610. They've got a version of that where you can add some, emulations of the tube preamp. They've got a Neve sound, they've got API, and of course there's, it's not 100% of the sound. Emulations can only get you so far. But I think that actually is a really great product for someone starting out to kind of explore those different sounds, explore how it changes your microphone, because the microphone sound definitely has a huge impact based on what preamp it's being run through. So I think folks that are looking to start out to explore some different sounds would be really surprised with even just those emulations, how drastically that changes the sound of the microphone and it's the way it responds to the voice. So, and the final thing with that is you also have the Universal Audio plugins to mix with, so you don't even have to necessarily process on the way in, but you can have access to those plugins when you're mixing and processing later. So that would be a really popular chain, while saying that's about $1,500 US. There are a handful of other tiers there. Again, if you're working in a less than ideal room, I really think the Sennheiser 416 is a really excellent option because of the tighter hypercardioid polar pattern. It offers a little bit more room rejection, a little bit more focus on the voice. The one thing that I personally have found with the 416 is, and I mentioned earlier, it does have a little bit of a roll off in the top end. So I actually like to prefer using the 416 with a preamp. My absolute favorite chain with that is actually with a preamp called the Maag, M-A-A-G, Pre-Q4. And the reason I love it so much is because it actually has a high-end shelf built into it, so I can open up a little bit of the top end, kind of the airiness, not necessarily the brightness range, but just open it up just a slight bit so it doesn't sound as boxy or as just kind of congested a little bit. So, that chain's not too expensive, but you do, of course, need a 500 series rack if you're going that option. But those are kind of just two popular chains, just without going into all the different options, because we could spend hours talking about the different options there. But long story short, there are actually a ton of different combinations out there now, even within a relatively budget-friendly price point. But yeah, again, the specific recommendations I think would come down to again what kind of voice we're working with, or voices, and then what specific style of narration or voiceover are we talking about.
The VO Radio Show is produced in the studios of Voodoo Sound. Radio, TV, sound design. Find it all at voodoo-sound.com.
Let's think about mic placement. So if you're getting one of these microphones, if you're in a room, so just for instance, you haven't got a specific booth, but you've got a bit of acoustic treatment around the place, where would you face the microphone? Say a room's got a door on one wall, maybe a large window on another wall, and then two blank walls.
Gotcha. I would definitely try and avoid the window as much as possible. I mean, any hard surface is going to have a decent amount of reflections, and that's what you're trying to minimize to reduce the amount of room tone that is coming through in the signal to have the most isolated voice possible. So it's staying probably the furthest away from the window, but. definitely not towards a corner as well. I would say in that scenario, if you're working in a like kind of a bedroom studio, even just right in the middle of the room, because if you're not having any acoustic treatment on the walls, the closer you get to any wall, you're going to get more and more reflections. So I would just try and stay as far away from any hard surface wall as possible. The good news, though, is that as long as you've got some blankets and maybe a mic stand or two lying around, you can do a pretty decent job just taking some blankets and kind of building a little blanket fort around the microphone area that you're recording. And that, at least in my experience, it's not perfect, but it certainly does cut a lot of the higher end frequencies, unless you're working with a thicker blanket. And the higher frequencies are what's at least most apparent in a recording to a listener in terms of hearing the room, which again, you're trying to isolate the voice as much as possible and minimize the room tone. So
there are also those porta booth type products too, aren't there? That can do a fairly good job of sort of reducing reflections.
Absolutely, yeah. The SE reflection filter, Real Traps makes a portable vocal booth. And those products are great, especially because they're often made with a thicker material. The thicker, more denser the material, the lower the frequency it's going to absorb and control. Again, I think the main focus, the easiest way to remove room tone is just kind of even just thinner products thinner blankets that can remove the higher end frequencies. But it is great if you can control more than just those higher frequencies, and those designated products, the vocal booths, again, they're made with normally a thicker material, so it's not just absorbing those higher frequencies, but it's helping control the whole frequency range and just, again, produce a more isolated, focused sound. A lot of times they're just like in a V shape, and you would put that kind of right behind the microphone and kind of wrapping around the microphone a little bit, if you will. A lot of times I would still put a blanket kind of directly behind the vocalist just to kind of tame those reflections as well. The portable vocal booths do a lot, but I find I still would want at least one more blanket behind the speaker just to tame sort of those rear reflections.
The one I use is the Harlan Hogan, who's a well-known voiceover talent in the US. He also sells a product called the Porta Booth and Porta Booth Pro, which is kind of, if you haven't seen one, it looks like a big sort of zip-up bag, but when you unfold it, it becomes a bellows, and it's packed with Auralex. And you place the microphone just inside, so it's almost coming out the front of the bellows. But that I use mine, it seems to work really, really well. I mean, you still pick up, obviously, room noise, but a lot less than you would without. But one of the things I've seen, and I remember a guy sending me a file of his voiceover, trying to work out why he was getting reflection. And it turned out in the end that he had blankets on this, he had windows covered, everything was done, but he was still getting reflection. He was using a desk mount microphone stand with nothing underneath it.
Yeah, right.
It's funny. That's the most common area I see people overlooking with their acoustic treatment, and it's almost the most direct because it's the closest at times with certain miking setups, especially with a desk mount. It's the closest hard reflection source. So yeah, definitely putting anything from even just like a piece of carpet. It doesn't even have to be that thick, but anything with a little bit of texture on that hard desk surface. That is the most common error in terms of soundproofing a VO studio I've seen well just my entire career, actually. So yeah, that's a good point. If you're still getting reflections, look. I mean, even computer screens, like obviously you can't put a piece of foam or anything on a computer screen, but at least turn away so you're not directly speaking against or right into a flat computer screen surface, because that will have some reflections as well.
Yeah. Andrew, just quickly, from a voiceover's point of view, standing as opposed to sitting anyway. I don't know too many voiceover artists that sit when they're voicing. Do you have a preference there?
If I'm out at someone else's studio, I stand because that's the common thing. But when I'm at home, I don't actually. I sit on a stool, which I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just find it a lot easier in here. The music stands are never quite tall enough.
Yeah.
So I'm always leaning forward or looking down to try and see the script. But if I'm sitting down, I've got it straight in front of me, which is good. And the music stand's covered in foam as well, so that works.
Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, It depends, but I know people say if you sit down, you lose energy. But I'm always like in a semi-coma anyway, so it doesn't really affect me.
Well, those couple of glasses of red wine for breakfast always get the day off to a good start, don't they?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Here's a question for you, Travis. If there was no budget restraint and you can buy whatever microphone and whatever preamp combination you want, forget the money, what would your choice be?
Hello, candy shop.
Yeah, that's tough. Man. I want to say that I'm going to shoot the highest in terms of mics, but I'm going to play it not safe, but just go with a mic that I love the most, just because every time I use it, it is easy. It gets the results I'm looking for. It's a mic called the Charter Oak E700. It's only $1,000 USD. It's from a smaller boutique manufacturing company from Connecticut here in the States. But it just has this tremendous low end, but it's a very natural flat frequency response overall. So it's going back to the original point I made, which it's versatile on a tremendous amount of voices, but it doesn't sacrifice sounding. It's not a jack of all trades, and it sacrifices being a master of none. It sounds like it's a master of everything, every single voice I put it in front of. Very, very quiet as well. I will say I would go with a more drool-worthy preamp, which is the NPNG. Preamps is another boutique company here from the States, but it's similar to the Avalon pre's, the M5 and the 2022, in terms of offering a very clean, but also kind of full-bodied. A lot of times, full-bodied sound. A lot of times, I find clean preamps, especially the more budget-friendly clean preamps, they are very clean. They're very low noise, but they can sound kind of thin, or they just don't have the natural weight and heft to them that, especially for voiceover, you're wanting to have as much fullness and power. Maybe not power, depending on what you're narrating, but at least natural fullness. So the E700 through the NPNG would probably be the mic pre-pairing of my dreams for a voiceover if I could, make ends meet or budget wasn't an option.
Yeah. NPNG, is that the guy in Chicago, out of Chicago?
Yes, I believe so.
Because I think I was talking to Harlan Hogan. I've got a funny feeling he has one because the guy, he builds them at home, doesn't he?
Yes, yeah, it's a very small operation.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure he's got one because he's actually lives very close to that guy. And set himself up with one of those. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a not very well-known product. It's still kind of more. It's smaller, but it's got a cult following. Anyone who knows about them seems to have nothing negative to say about them. Everything is. It's just everything you would want in a clean but full-bodied preamp. Again, there are tons of other alternatives too. That the Avalon would be my second choice, next runner-up. The 2022, just because it's very, very close, but the MPNG just has this just a little bit of a polish to it while still not compromising the natural transparent tone. So,
well, the guy that actually has been servicing the 414 of mine also builds preamps, and I came across one of these ages ago. I forgot what it was, but it was at a big studio here in Melbourne, and it wasn't until I called this guy, and he told me he'd been working at that studio fixing up their Neve desk. And then said, "Oh, look, I also supplied them with one of my preamps, and it's a company called Giles Audio. Worth having a look at. The guys that have one were raving about it, said it was the best thing. Very basic. I mean, really, it's just gain and a couple of switches. That's it. But it sounds pretty spectacular. So that's another one of those backyard homemade."
Yeah.
Boutique preamps.
Giles, you say? I haven't heard of that.
Giles. Giles.
Oh, there you go.
Giles Audio.
Travis, I'm going to take you down the other end of the spectrum for a moment. I obviously being involved with this podcast and another one that I work on, I do listen to a few podcasts just to see what's out there, and the caliber of audio quality is just awful, which I guess is part of the attraction of podcasting, let's be honest. But if I was to take you down to the other end of the spectrum and talk about a USB microphone that someone who has a little podcast that they do, and they want to improve the quality of that, there's a fair few out there, I know, but are there any that stand out as a better, a better option than my Apple headset?
Unfortunately, my experience there is really limited. In fact, the only thing I can actually stand behind is perhaps this Logitech USB headset that I'm currently using right now.
Right.
That we use our sales team here uses with our computer-based phone. So that's honestly my only experience right now with USB headsets. But this Logitech one's working out great.
Right. Well, there you go. There's your recommendation. Done.
Yeah.
It is one thing about podcasting. Podcasting is becoming, as we know, obviously more and more prevalent. I just wish there's some great podcasts out there that I just can't listen to because I usually listen to it with my headphones on when I'm, doing the gardening or working in the garage or whatever. And I can't do it. It hurts my ears too much.
Yeah. I mean, luckily though, I mean, if again, as I mentioned earlier, the budget range interfaces, I feel like just over the last couple of years have gotten so much better in both preamp and converter technology and just sound overall. So I feel like it's easier than ever for someone if they actually are serious about doing a podcast and care, even just a little bit about getting their audio quality to be improved. You can get like the Audient ID 14. I'm thinking is a kind of a $300 entry level, but really excellent quality interface. And you can get like a Studio Projects C1, which is one of the most popular budget friendly condenser microphones for $250, and or even a dynamic at that price. But yeah, I mean, I guess it all starts with first wanting to have an improvement in quality, and I guess that's part of it.
Yeah, and look, and as I said before, I mean, it's always that's one of the great things about podcasting is that anybody can do it, and that's I think that's led to such great content that's out there.
For sure.
Yeah, but it'd be awesome if you could have the best of both worlds.
There's also a lot of horrible content out there.
Oh, yes. I'm not saying that at all.
Yes.
I'm not saying there's not. Trust me. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, before we go, one thing I did see, I was scanning around and saw that Bruce Springsteen dropped into Sound Pure and in the shop and had to play on some guitars.
Whoa.
Yeah. He actually, I think that was the third time that he came back into the shop. And I mentioned this, I think last week we spoke, but I think it's because his one of his children actually was going to Duke University, which is just 10 minutes down the road from us. So his first stop was when they were touring the school. I think his second stop was during graduation, and then the most recent stop when he came through was I think when he actually played the night prior in Raleigh, which is the capital of North Carolina. It's probably about 20 minutes down the road. But he remembered the shop from the previous two times, and he came by and he played I believe two guitars. He ended up buying an amp, but he didn't buy any of the guitars. However, we did have those two guitars sold by the end of that day because it becomes really easy to sell a guitar once Bruce Springsteen played it and then put it back down. So
absolutely.
It was a little bit of a bidding war, I remember, on those instruments. But it was really awesome. He's such a nice guy. I mean, he's just incredibly humble, incredibly down to earth. He's very much like, oh yeah, come. You guys want to take pictures? Come. I mean, he knows he's walking into a guitar shop. He's not dumb. He knows that everyone's going to be just like, oh. But it's always a cool time when he and other folks like that end up swinging by the shop. That's the cool thing about being in this area. There's just a lot of it's called the Triangle area between Raleigh, Chapel Hill, and Durham. We've got a lot of tours and stuff coming through the area, so it's not uncommon for maybe not people like to the caliber of Bruce Springsteen coming by on a regular basis, but definitely people well-known musicians. It's not an infrequent occurrence for them to be swinging by.
Doesn't it? It increases your respect for the man. You respect him for his music and everything else. But when you see someone like that who can be so down to earth that they can walk into a guitar store, as you say, knowing that people are going to go, oh my God, that's Bruce Springsteen, but then still, basically just be a part of the community. It just increases your respect for them tenfold, doesn't it? Well, for me, it does anyway.
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely. I mean, I mean, he's never lost sight of why he got into playing music to begin with. It's to connect to people, to tell a story, and yeah, no, it's inspiring. To watch someone who's achieved such fame and such recognition to still remember that he's a fragile human being, just like the rest of us, and and to treat everyone with the same respect like that. It definitely increases the respect you have for him.
Yeah, I know a pharmacist in Minneapolis, and he used to get Prince drop in quite a lot.
Don't.
Is it too early?
Yeah, it's too early, I think. I think that's still a little raw, mate.
Okay, sorry.
Salt on the wound.
Well, I think we solved a few problems as far as microphones and preamps are concerned, and created even more.
We probably have created even more questions, haven't we? Yes.
Yes, indeed.
But it's a worthwhile conversation nonetheless, because let's face it, when it comes down to it, you want to be sure that what you're delivering is sounding right for the poor guy at the other end who's got to sit down and put it all together at the end of the day, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and the trouble is when you're sitting here like, in your own studio doing the voice, you always try to change everything to sound like somebody else.
Yes.
And that's not what the person at the other end wants. Otherwise, they would have booked somebody else.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's your voice that they've booked. Exactly.
Now, if someone wants to get some information or, have a bit of a chat about a microphone or a preamp or any other gear, how do they get in contact with you, Travis?
Sure. Yeah. Our website is probably the best way to see what we're all about. It's just SoundPure, SoundPure.com. We've got all the products that we represent there. If you're looking to learn more about both recording and just kind of hear some of the mics and the preamps that we love and get behind, our YouTube channel would absolutely be the best place for that. We've got, I think, just over 1,000 videos. We hit that mark just a couple months ago at this point. But we've got everything from mic comparison video shootouts to in-depth tutorials on mic placement to just deep dive reviews on some of the products we love. So between our website, soundpure.com, and our Soundpure Studios YouTube channel, those will absolutely show the listeners kind of what we're about. And likewise, too, there's our phone number and email address. We're more than happy to talk to people, learn what they're looking to do with their voiceover recordings, and again, recommend the best product, whether it's for just recording their voice or recording a handful of voices, and of course within their budget too. So definitely don't hesitate to get in touch with us, any of you all listeners, if you have any questions about how to make the best out of your recording situation.
Beautiful. We're going to have to go there, aren't we, Robbo?
I think we are. Does the tax man pay for that?
There's got to be some way of making it work.
Absolutely. I hope so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that winds us up for another show. So thank you, Travis Hall from Soundpure. Hopefully we'll talk again very soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Travis.
Absolutely. No,
Brilliant.
Thank you too. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Cheers,
We
man.
appreciate your time. Cheers. Thanks very much. And we'll be back next week. I don't know what we're going to be doing next week, but something.
In a world where only the best voice will do. Realtimecasting.com.
Well, there you go. There's Travis Hall from Soundpure in North Carolina telling us his favourite combination of microphone and preamp for your voice. Hopefully you've learned something.
I would be interested to know what the people out there think, what their favourite combos are.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's look, if you've got a favourite combo, why don't you jump onto our Facebook, which is the VO Radio Show Facebook, and drop us a message and tell us what your favourite combination is and why.
Yeah, well, and then more importantly, and why? Because I think for me that's the X factor, isn't it?
Yeah. Like what you're using it for and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
cool.
Indeed. All right. Well, that was another big show.
Big show. Love it. What part of the world will we end up next week? I don't know.
Let's go to South Africa. I've always wanted to go there.
Ooh, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Let's try and organise something.
See you there in Springbok territory.
Yeah, lovely. As long as we beat them in cricket and rugby. I don't care.
The VO Radio Show is produced in the studios of Voodoo Sound. To polish your next audio production, check us out at voodoo-sound.com. Find professional voices simply all in one place. Realtimecasting.com, including me.